It's a Wednesday evening, and the congregation I pastor is having a meeting. Now, lots of churches have regular Wednesday evening events, but ours doesn't. This is unusual. Sitting in the front row is a woman with her family. This is the first time most of us have met her. Strapped around her ankle is a GPS monitor, like the kind worn by prisoners out on parole. We're not sure if it's mic'd, whether someone out there can listen in. So, as our meeting begins, this woman does the logical thing one might do when faced with this kind of situation. She pulls out her cell phone, cranks up some Latin music, and stuffs it in her sock next to the ankle monitor. Her name is Edith Espinal. She was a teenager when her father brought her to the U.S. She made a life for herself here in Columbus. Now she's 39. She's married, mother of 3 children, 2 of them U.S. citizens. She has no criminal record, despite the ankle monitor. What she does have is a deportation order. Her legal application for asylum has been denied by a federal judge. In less than a week, she is to check in with ICE. ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Their Columbus office is on the 3rd floor of the historic Levesque Tower downtown, just 1 block north of where we are right now. Edith has been ordered to bring with her a one-way plane ticket to Mexico, which she is to purchase, financing her own deportation. If she complies, she'll be separated from her family. She'll miss her daughter's junior and senior year of high school. She'll return to the place where she lived when she was young, the Mexican state of Michoacan, which ironically is on the U.S. do not travel list due to persistent violent crime. If she shows up at her appointment without a plane ticket, she could be detained on the spot, and you and I and other taxpayers will finance her deportation. If she skips the appointment and tries to hide, she's got this thing, this shackle around her ankle, broadcasting her location and maybe her conversations. Edith is one of thousands of people currently facing these impossible decisions. If you were Edith Espinal, what would you do? What would you do? Well, what she did was seek sanctuary, look for a house of worship to take her in to live temporarily. What she did was call together a group of organizers, attorneys, and religious leaders to see if this was even possible. That's when I first met her. What she did, several days after that, was bring her family into our church building on a Wednesday evening, sit herself down in the front row, crank up some lively, although muffled, theme music, and see if these strangers would take a risk alongside her. The word sanctuary comes from the Latin sanctus, which means holy. It refers to buildings, places considered holy. For those, many of those who have offered sanctuary spaces, there's a firm belief that hospitality is always a holy act. The life being sheltered is sacred. Now, sanctuary is an ancient practice. The Hebrew Bible calls for the creation of 6 cities of refuge for the people of Israel. Those who killed another person unintentionally could escape to one of these cities. As long as they stayed within that city, they were safe from anyone seeking vengeance. The ancient Greeks recognized temples and sacred groves as places of sanctuary for debtors and even criminals. In Rome, a fugitive slave was safe from their pursuing master if they clung to the feet of a statue of Caesar. As the church grew and gained prominence and built their own buildings, these too became places of sanctuary. Sanctuary was a legal and common practice throughout Christianized Europe for over 1,000 years, up to the 16th century. The Underground Railroad was a kind of sanctuary. In the 1980s, there was a sanctuary movement in the U.S. to give shelter to refugees fleeing violence of civil wars in Latin America. So currently, right now, a key document for sanctuary is a 2011 memo issued by the director of ICE to all field office directors. This memo instructs ICE officers not to enter what it calls sensitive locations. On the list of sensitive locations are schools, hospitals, and houses of worship. So this is what makes houses of worship different than sanctuary cities. In sanctuary cities, local police officers focus on basic safety for all residents, and they don't share information with federal ICE officers. But ICE can still be in those cities, make arrests and deportations, and they do. But sanctuary churches, synagogues, temples, mosques are sensitive locations ICE has been instructed not to enter. They're little islands of protection in an increasingly terrifying landscape for folks who are undocumented, or because of our outdated immigration laws, folks who are undocumentable. So, according to this memo, just about every town in America has something like border walls. Only these border walls of sensitive locations, rather than keeping immigrants out, keep ICE officers out. Now, I should emphasize, this is not a law. It's a policy, and it can be changed. In our more secular age, our religious buildings aren't considered quite as sacred as they once were. But hey, at least we're sensitive, right? That's got to count for something. So there we were on that Wednesday evening with Edith in our sensitive location. It was our second meeting in 4 days, and as you can imagine, there were plenty of questions. Question: what are the legal risks? Answer: harboring unauthorized individuals is punishable up to 5 years in prison. But this has never been enforced. But we seem to be living in unprecedented times. Question: will we have help? Answer: yes, absolutely. An organizer will work closely with us. A pro bono attorney is working on her legal case. A strong interfaith network is ready to provide support, including daily meal coordination. Question: where will she stay? Answer: she'll have a private apartment in a room. She'll have access to the church kitchen and the rest of the building as it's available. Her family can come and go as needed. Question: will ICE come and beat down the door? Answer: probably not. Question: will our building be targeted for vandalism? Answer: we don't know. What will this look like on a day-to-day basis? We don't know. How long will she be staying? We don't know. Do we have more time to think about it? Answer: no. One of the people in the room was a second grader, Mateo, who had insisted to his mother that she bring him to a midweek evening church meeting. He himself had just been diagnosed with cancer, thankfully treatable. He'd received his first round of chemo. But he wanted to be in the room so he could vote yes, so Edith could stay with her family. After our discussion and collecting written feedback from everyone in attendance, it was clear Mateo wasn't alone. Later that evening, our board voted unanimously to be a sanctuary congregation. Just a few days after that, Edith, rather than going to her ICE appointment with or without that plane ticket, officially entered sanctuary. It was a time of celebration, of hospitality and solidarity, and also a time of grief, as her life was now confined within these walls. Edith was the first person in Ohio to publicly enter sanctuary, and that was over 1 year ago. There are now 2 people in sanctuary here in Columbus, 5 in Ohio, and over 50 nationally. And those are just the public cases. There are many, many non-public cases not included in that count. Those themes of grief and solidarity have been with us this whole time as we continue to hold sacred space for Edith and do what we can with her to get her back home to the family apartment on the west side of Columbus. One of the most painful parts of this experience for me has been watching our church building become a prison for Edith. Because the point of sanctuary really is to get someone safely out of sanctuary. To do this, to try to do this, we've held press conferences to tell her story. We've had public rallies and vigils. We've spoken with our elected officials to urge them to do what they can for her case. We've had countless organizing meetings. Edith's attorney continues to pursue several paths that would enable her to stay here legally with her family. This is all incredibly challenging work and not particularly hopeful. That's the really hard reality of this story. But there's always been another side to it, the more human side. Look, I grew up in the church, and now I'm a pastor. I've heard this teaching, love thy neighbor, my whole life, and I've preached it. What my neighbor Edith keeps teaching me is that when love flows to the neighbor, it flows right back, and it overflows to the neighborhood and the wider community. As another sanctuary pastor said of the woman living with them, we have given her a home, she has given us the world. Over this past year, I've been in a privileged position to witness some beautiful neighborliness and human goodness. It has looked like shared meals with some really good food, concerts to raise awareness and raise money, family birthday parties, celebrated in the church, of course. A weekly community yoga class with Edith. New friendships. Connecting via live video feed with others in sanctuary around the country. Making music together. Prayers. Encouraging notes from children who, like Mateo, seem to be overwhelmingly in favor of mothers staying with their families. We will continue to work with Edith to help her stay alongside with her family here. We don't have to wait for these big systems to change in order to be the kind of people, the kind of neighbors, the kind of community we want to be in this world. I believe we can all be sanctuary people, and there's no law or policy powerful enough to prevent this. Thank you.